Gracie Jiu Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 84 of the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. This episode is all about yoga and Jiu Jitsu, and I have 5 Jiu Jitsu black belts who are going to tell us about their experience, how they got involved with yoga, insights into their personal practice, and why yoga is so good for Jiu Jitsu practitioners to do. But first, let's start with a couple of quotes and a shout out. And first quote is, "Yoga is not for the flexible, it's for the willing." And next quote is, "Yoga takes you into the present moment, the only place where life exists." So great quotes, great things to keep in mind. Okay, want to shout out to Jennifer Gray, also known as Jiu Jitsu Jen, who recently became a supporter of the show through our Patreon page. So thank you, Jen. Appreciate it very much. All right. Jiu-Jitsu black belts and yoga practitioners / instructors Phil Migliarese, Nic Gregoriades, Dustin Brown, Joey Diehl, and Sebastian Brosche are all featured on the show today. Each one of these guys has a vast and deep understanding of yoga and how it can be the perfect addition to one's jiu-jitsu practice. After the interviews, I'll do a short recap and share a few words about my yoga experience, and then we'll do a short Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment, so make sure you stick around to the end for that. Okay, without further ado, let's talk about yoga and jiu-jitsu. Okay, the subject is yoga and jiu-jitsu, and we're speaking with Phil Migliarese, who's a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, along with he and his brother Ricardo own Balance Studios, and he's also the founder of Yoga for Fighters, which we'll talk about. So welcome, Phil.
Hey, thank you for having me.
And Phil was featured on episode 41 of the show, so if you haven't heard that one, definitely go back and check that out. You'll get a much more in-depth glimpse into Phil's background and that kind of thing. But all right, for our episode today, Phil, let's start with just, who's your black belt under and where do you currently train, my friend?
I got my black belt from Dustin Gracie, second oldest son of RealyogiDiehl, and I own a school in Philadelphia, train in Philadelphia, Balance Studios. So that's what I'm doing now.
With many affiliate schools as well. So, Phil, how did you get exposed or drawn to yoga initially?
At a very early age. I was about 8 years old. My parents put me in a very interesting school. The gym teacher there was a yoga instructor and the gym teacher, and so we did a series of normal little kid warm-ups, and then she threw in a bunch of yoga poses. I really connected to the yoga portion of it, the breathing portion of it, inverted like headstand version, especially as a little kid. And it wasn't until I was about like 11 or so. So I started 8 in that school, 8 years old, and then when I was about 11, almost 12, I went to my first class at a local. It was actually a bookstore called Garden of Letters, and in the basement there they had yoga classes. And at that time, no one was really doing yoga. There was only a select few people, especially in Philadelphia. So that's how I started, and books and seminars, and I did some extensive traveling to learn. So I put maybe as much, if not more, effort into learning yoga as I did jiu-jitsu.
Wow, it's wonderful. And you eventually it led you over to India, was it, and to train with the master?
Yeah, I lived in India, and the same thing I did with RealyogiDiehl. I wanted to learn from the best. I wanted to go to the source. So, I studied with RealyogiDiehl in California, Brazil. Studied with Patabi Joyce, who is the founder of Ashtanga Yoga. And I lived in India here and there. So, I would go to college for a few months and then get on a plane and go travel. And I also followed Patabi Joyce everywhere in America. So I was like a slight groupie. Nice. So again, I wanted to learn the method, learn it correctly, and teach it correctly before, and I eventually got what was called back then an authorization. So that was like a certification, but very traditional, because it was an authorization was verbal, and your teacher would tell you you're ready to go, you're ready to teach. So I got authorized to teach the first half of the Ashtanga Yoga system, Series 1 and Series 2.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you really threw yourself in full force and totally committed to it. Was there anything you found that was challenging initially when you got involved? Man, when you start as a kid, there's very few challenges. The challenge was finding a teacher that was local. Now there are a lot of good Ashtanga Yoga instructors, but when I started, there was no one. There were traveling instructors. There were people that went to India, coming back, very similar to the way Jiu-Jitsu was brought here. You had a few Brazilians way back, and it was exactly the same. And now you can find yoga and Jiu-Jitsu pretty much everywhere, and, all pretty good instructors. Yep, it's definitely changed over the years, and they both kind of parallel in that aspect. So, yeah, Phil, tell us a little about what type or style that you practice primarily, and then maybe a little bit about what's the differences between those and other styles.
I primarily do Ashtanga Yoga. I'm actually heading to a class right now to teach.
Nice.
And I also do my Yoga for Fighter system, like the System 1. It's a really good hip opener, hamstring opener. So I actually literally do what I put together for everyone else to do. And I do that a couple times a week. And then I also do, I'll do a practice. Generally, I practice around 11 o'clock every day. And at night, I'll do a more still practice. Like, instead of moving through and creating, warmth and heat, and, it's a rigorous practice. I'll change up at night and make it a more, relaxed, still, hold the postures longer. I have a particular type of system for after jiu-jitsu training, too, to complement what we just did and, kind of put me back together after I roll.
Right. Much needed, I'm sure. So you mentioned Yoga for Fighters. Let's talk about that. Your idea and the realization of that idea, Yoga for Fighters. Tell us when that started and what led you to that. And it really was ahead of its time. It was the first product of its kind that had jiu-jitsu and MMA practitioners in mind, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I have a newsletter, Jiu-Jitsu Matrix, and I was sending out very early also jiu-jitsu moves online through an email database, and I would get more questions about yoga than I would about jiu-jitsu. So it made me think, I've got to do something here. I have to put something out and help people. And so I spent a couple of years putting a sequence together, testing it out on my students and when I traveled and taught, and came up with Yoga for Fighters. And it's the same sequence today as it was when I started 15 years ago. And I find it's a really good base level, entry level, doable system for fighters, and it actually will improve the positions that we're often in as jiu-jitsu practitioners and MMA fighters. So, it was definitely the first. I don't know anyone else that was doing it. Now we have so many yoga teachers that, there's so many more people to spread the word and to motivate people to actually practice. And that's all I really care about. I just want everyone to practice yoga. Absolutely. The most important thing.
Right on. Well, props to you for, being kind of, like I said, ahead of the times with that and being a forerunner to that and, really touching people's lives within that whole arena. So very cool. And I do have the DVD, and on my website I have broken that down and done a review. So excellent product. And you recently
I don't even know if there are any more DVDs.
Yeah, but now you converted to an app, correct?
Oh yeah, it's on all the app stores now, and it's really easy. And I keep putting more and more stuff on there. So I keep adding to the bundle of like I have yoga for BJJ.com, yoga for Muay Thai.com, yoga for Boxing.com coming out very, very soon. So very sports specific workouts. They're way shorter than the yoga for fighters. Yoga for fighters is like the centerpiece system that everybody should do, no matter what art you're doing. So it's a way of putting you back in place. And those other little smaller systems are specifically designed for professional athletes. Like if you're a professional jiu-jitsu, boxing, because over the last like 10 years, I've worked with professionals in all those categories. So I kind of took some notes down, and it seems to help. Like the boxing one seems to help other boxers that I've worked with. So actually neat.
Very cool. And you do live classes as well. One statement on your website, Yoga for Fighters, that really stands out that I love is Yoga for Fighters can help you center yourself and control your first opponent, your own ego. So that's really great.
100%. Because it gives you time to sit with yourself, to breathe, and to deal with yourself. I taught a course this weekend, like a 4-hour boot camp, and part of what I try to instill, I always call it like the yoga bubble. It sounds silly, but it's this imaginary bubble right around your mat, and you're only into what you're doing, your mat, your postures. Don't worry about what else is going on in that classroom, who can do what. That's something you should never ever focus on. It's one way to pull back your improvement and consciousness. Because you're paying attention on the outside, not the inside. So,
that's great, man.
And that leads a lot to ego. And your ego wants you to do bigger, better things instead of just doing what you can and doing it often.
And your ego wants you to compare yourself to those around you. So I love that bubble because it helps you focus on what's important right there, right in the moment, and you, nothing else. So in a society that has so many distractions and are easily distracted, it's such a key principle to keep in mind and incorporate.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the breathwork aspect of your program and your practice. Just how important is that part, and talk a little bit about that.
The breathing system I borrowed from the Ashtanga Yoga program. It's a type of breathing. Sanskrit word is called Ujjayi breathing, means sound, something you can hear, sound, victorious breath. So it's a total nasal breath, and this is the type of breathing that we do while we're in motion, while we transition from pose to pose. So it's called a vinyasa. So you go linking one pose to the next, or linking breathing together with posture. And it's a 100% nasal breath. The inhale is just a deep inhale, very deep into the chest, and then secondly in the belly. And then the exhale sounds like Darth Vader. It's very hard. It's very hard to show on a tape, on a video. You can get a sense of it, but I've, like I said, I just did a boot camp this weekend, a 4-hour thing. I was able to dig into the breathing method a lot better. The thing that I can tell you when you're doing the practice, be as conscious as possible on the way you're breathing. So hopefully you're in a class with a qualified instructor, you're watching a video with a qualified instructor, and they should have that emphasis on breathing. Part of what yoga is the connection between breathing and movement, breathing and posture. So you could do a moving meditation, just walking down the street, breathing, and putting your walking together with breathing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a flowing yoga pose or a yoga sequence.
Absolutely. In fact, breathing during movement is vitally important.
100%. And it's the parallel to fighting in jiu-jitsu. And I also made a distinction. Yoga is not jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is not yoga. And what I mean by that is that the breathing method in jiu-jitsu is plenty different than the breathing method of movement-based, vinyasa-based yoga. So those are other things we reviewed, methods of breathing on the mat. So they're a little bit different, but still the consciousness parallel is what you want to focus on. So you should be conscious of your breathing while you're rolling, too.
Absolutely. Very key. So if someone's out there listening and they have thought about trying yoga, maybe looked into it a little bit or considering it, what advice would you have for them?
I just put up about a week or two ago a brand new download on yogaforfighters.com. It's a 3-day challenge. I kind of coach people through 30 days of practice. I have a little contract there that you sign too. It's kind of cool. You sign it, and you make a declaration to all your friends, maybe on Facebook or verbally, that you are committed to 30 days of practice. And this is doable for everyone. And then I send a weekly video, and then you do it for 7 days straight, and then you change it up a little bit after 7 days, and hopefully we can get through a 30-day period.
Nice. That's the accountability.
So like a little calendar sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you can do something physically, go to a class. Like if you want something right now, that's what you can do. Otherwise, I would look up a beginner class, make sure it's a good studio, good instructor, and just do that. Don't be afraid also of being like, let's say, the worst person in class. I would actually advise being the worst person in class and just do your own thing, because you learn how to do your own thing that way. So, and there's no worse or better, obviously, in yoga, but I'm just using that word because that's how people feel sometimes.
Right.
So, same thing with jiu-jitsu. So everyone feels like they're going to suck at jiu-jitsu and they never take a class. That's what it's for. You go out there, you're going to be the worst one in there, and that's the point. You get a little bit better each class, and that's the point of actually owning a school, is to make people better. So,
excellent, man. I love your insight and these little bits to keep in mind for everyone who's considering it. All right, so as we close, anything else that just comes to your mind on the subject you'd like to share?
I do. This is the last thing. I'm looking at my notes from my boot camp, right? So I'll give a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I told them, I've been hearing this for the last 30 years. I'm doing yoga 30-something years. And everyone that wants to get started, they're like, I just don't have the time. Like, I don't buy that one bit. Like, zero. I don't buy that. Everyone on this planet has a second to practice. Everyone. And whoever doesn't want to find time just doesn't want to find time to do it for some reason. So if you do, you have 5 minutes. Like I said, I made a download. It's literally 3.5 minutes, one video. You can do that every single day. So everybody has time, even if it's like like I said, a 5-minute period. Everybody has 5 minutes they can step away from their world and step back. So that still counts. Many people think that if they're not diving in 100% and doing handstand splits,
right,
not doing yoga. But I wouldn't even focus on the fancy stuff. That comes next. That comes in 5-10 years if you're practicing every day. But the real stuff is just sitting, breathing, becoming more conscious in a very simple pose. So my suggestion, just go do something. Figure it out. I try to make it easier on my website, and there are a million classes out there in the world for basics. Sign up for one of those so you can always make time.
That's great, man. So just get started and do something, and don't worry about biting off the whole enchilada at one time, or if you're going to be doing it perfectly or this and that. Just get started and start where you are and move forward. I completely agree with what you said about, everybody's got 5 minutes. People make time for what they feel is important. So if you make this a priority, you got 5 minutes. So true stuff.
Well, I had a private conversation after the boot camp with somebody. They didn't want to ask this question in the camp, so I talked to them on the side. And they were like, yeah, I really do have a hard time finding time, this and that. And I said, what else do you do with your time? What do you do on Friday night? They're like, well, I go out with my friends, this and that. And I was like, are you willing to give that up to be practiced? They're like, no. I'm like, that's the thing. Like, you have to take one thing and find it more important than another.
Right.
So they're not willing to, give up the whole night of drinking, and then you lose Saturday and Sunday, too, because you don't feel like doing yoga.
Exactly.
If you're drinking. Like, I don't drink, but I have drank. I had a drink before, and it just doesn't feel good. So, and it does not, go well if you're in a yoga / jiu-jitsu lifestyle,
I completely agree.
So they weren't they weren't willing to give it up, but they got the idea.
Yes.
And I also made a joke, you'll be richer, too, if you don't do that night, too, because you can save a lot of money.
That's true. That's true. I don't drink either, but I did for a lot of my life, and all those things you just mentioned are spot on for sure.
Man, I got one headache from it, and I was like, moving on. We're going to do something else.
Good. It didn't take you as long as it did me to learn, but that's good. Eventually, we came to the same
nobody
conclusion.
in my family drinks.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, my friend, I appreciate, as always, the chance to talk to you and for your insight and knowledge, and thank you for sharing that with the listeners. I'm sure they're going to get a lot out of it, so thank you very much.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope that helps.
Absolutely, and keep doing what you're doing, brother.
Thanks so much.
Okay, I'm speaking with Nic Gregoriades, BJJ black belt and founder of the Jiu Jitsu Brotherhood, and he's also the creator of the video Yoga for Grapplers. So welcome, Nic.
Thanks, Marty. I appreciate that, my man.
All right, and Nic was featured on a recent episode 81, so if you haven't heard that, check that out for more in-depth background about Nic. But today we're talking about yoga. So Nic, let's just start. For those who aren't familiar with you, let us know who your black belt's under, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, my man. So my black belt's under Roger Gracie, and been training grappling and jiu-jitsu for coming up on, I'd say, 15, 16 years now, maybe a bit longer, maybe 17 years.
So, Nic, how did you get exposed to yoga? I mean, what initially drew you to it?
I think the simplest answer is watching Hickson in choke. I didn't know what he was doing was actually yoga. I just thought it was an advanced form of calisthenics or gymnastica natural. And then I started tracing back what he was doing, and I realized, I read somewhere that he had a yoga teacher named Orlando Carney, who was actually he was the originator of the gymnastica natural system, according to several accounts. And I realized that gymnastica natural incorporated many elements of yoga. And in fact, when you saw or see Hickson performing these regimens, a lot of the time he's doing straight up stuff that's taken just from yoga. And then I was chatting to a friend once who's a yoga instructor, and he said to me, we're talking about the subject of Hickson and the film Choke, and he just said straight up, Hickson is a yoga master, and that blew my mind. I knew he had dabbled in it, and I knew he had played around with it, but I didn't realize that he was that advanced in it. And the guy just said, yeah, no doubt, this guy's a yoga master as well. Wow. And that started me thinking, because at the time it was my understanding or my belief that Hickson was the finest expression of jiu-jitsu available. So I was like, look, I want to be as good at jiu-jitsu as possible. And if, you've heard of the concept of modeling, right? You take someone who excels in any, so you take someone who excels in any field of endeavor or any skill or discipline, and you look at what they're doing and you emulate them. And I was like, well, if this dude does yoga, then there's got to be something to it, So I always dabbled in different systems of yoga. And then one year, I think this was maybe 7 years ago, I moved into an apartment that was down the street from a yoga studio, and I just said, I'm going to take this thing as far as I can, because the thing that had been holding me back a lot was, I'm too old to really start. I'm not the most flexible guy in town. It's too late. It's a very limiting belief, and I knew it was a limiting belief, but somehow that year I thought to myself, well, if the yoga studio is down the street from my apartment, and literally when I say down the street, it was like a 5-minute walk, and I bought this unlimited membership there, and I said, no, I'm going to dive into this. And I started going twice a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and I spent a year on a deep dive, full immersion. And there's certain things in yoga that I'm never going to be able to do because I just don't have the particular body type, and also the nature of jiu-jitsu training is it causes a certain amount of musculature and development in certain parts of your body that are not. It's going to be almost impossible to overcome them, But still, that year of training and doing yoga really, it laid a very good foundation. And since then, I've never really given it up, and I've really tried to keep it a big part of my life and a big balance to my jiu-jitsu training.
So, what are the main styles or style that you practice? Have you tried several, or are you mainly into one? And explain a little bit about some of the differences.
Yeah, so I have tried a few, and I guess the one that I did the most during that first year was Ashtanga, which is a very strict, some people might even say hard, systematic approach. You run through the sequence, and the sequence is the same every time until you master it, and then you do then the next sequence, and you keep doing that the same every time until your teacher reckons you're ready, and then you move on to the next one. And I think it has its place, and I have a lot of respect for it, but I found the rigidity to be a little bit stifling, and I found it very, very difficult, very, very difficult. And there came a point where I was having to work myself up to go to the classes, because it's like a proper 2-hour production to do the full, what's it called? Self-practice class, the Mysore. You go there, you do your 5 sun salutations A, 5 sun salutations B, then you do like a bunch of prerequisite postures, and all the while you're doing this very specific breathing. There's no rest periods. It's a very like one size fits all sort of approach, and there's very little deviation from the system, and I don't like that. There's just something about me. I think it's kind of like an authority figure type thing. It's not my vibe at all.
Right.
So I got to a point where like I wasn't looking forward to classes. I wasn't enjoying it. And Tim Ferriss, the author of the 4-Hour Workweek and the 4-Hour Body, he's a very smart dude. He said, if I told you the best way to lose weight would be to tape bowling balls to your hands and then sprint up hills, that's all very well. It doesn't mean you're going to do it, right? Like It has to be practical and workable. And for me, I just found that system wasn't practical and workable for me. So I started during this year of my like deep dive. I was experimenting with other styles like Iyengar and Yin Yoga, which are they're less. I would say they're like softer styles, and they have less to do with this flowing method and more to do with you. The teacher would prescribe a few set poses, and you'd hold them for longer times. Right. And there was, I don't want to say less of a physical component because they're both physical disciplines, but it was less taxing to me. Like I found like doing like hardcore jiu-jitsu sparring and then trying to do a 90-minute to 2-hour Ashtanga class the next day or the same day even sometimes was difficult, dude. It was very difficult. Whereas the slightly more balanced types the slightly softer types like Iyengar would combine much better with the hard, extremely physical nature of jiu-jitsu sparring. I found that they balanced each other. But I guess for me, my whole approach to yoga is I try not to let the traditional label of yoga and the traditional connotations and the traditional definitions that word brings up, I try not to let them limit my yoga practice. For me, the word yoga, it means union, right? And for me, it's all about union of the body and the mind through specific movements or stretches and awareness of the breath. So sometimes I'll be in trouble somewhere and I'll meet a guy who's a CrossFit coach, and he will show me a specific type of warm-up or stretch or mobility exercise, and I will incorporate that into my practice. I'm not going to limit myself and say I just do Iyengar yoga, and if it doesn't come from that, I'm not going to use it, because I think that's very limiting. And I guess my specific approach to yoga is it's a fusion of many little bits and pieces from many different physical disciplines, which include Pilates, yoga, calisthenics, a bit of gymnastics, a bit of, if I'm honest, like almost anything physical I do, I consider yoga. Include jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a form of combat yoga. It's like, and yoga is a form of solo jiu-jitsu. Interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Like you, I am drawn to more of the quote-unquote soft or yin styles. These tend to be a lot more restorative. And so I appreciate that aspect. I appreciate all aspects, but I really feel like if you're doing other things like jiu-jitsu, this type of yoga, at least for me, is a lot more about recuperating and centering and bringing all those restorative aspects in. I like how you truly make it your own, and instead of defined in these limitations of style or terminology or whatever, you incorporate different elements and truly make it your own practice, which I think is awesome. I think that we should all get to that place, whether in yoga or jiu-jitsu, have foundation and fundamentals, but eventually make it your true expression of your particular art. Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, we all have similarities. We're all human, and most of us have, 2 arms and 2 legs and a certain set of physical limitations and physical abilities, but we're also very different. And I think for a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, we have such specific needs and requirements because we're doing such a specific thing with our bodies over and over again, that for us to just like drop into a certain class that might cater to, I don't know, soccer moms or, like an example, one of my Ashtanga teachers, she was an ex-ballerina, and she could do stuff that I'm never going to be able to do. I just had to accept it. Like, this is never, ever going to happen. And if I tried to do what she did with too much intensity, which is the way I was going, just hurt myself, So the thing with like my system is nothing is too extreme. Most of the stuff can be done by the average grappler or the average jiu-jitsu guy that doesn't have any major physical limitations.
Awesome. So tell us about Yoga for Grapplers, how that came to be, a little bit about it, and why yoga is so good for jiu-jitsu practitioners.
Yeah, but so like, for me, I've said this on many podcasts and videos, but it's all about like, you've heard that expression, or maybe you haven't heard it. I think it's some weird thing that's been floating around my brain for a while. Like, you are the weapon, right? Like, because you are the thing that your jiu-jitsu is expressed through, like your body. Like, you can't do jiu-jitsu through a computer, right? It's like, it's done through your physicality is the vehicle that you express your jiu-jitsu through, right? So I'm always thinking to myself, like, if my body is not functioning well, then my jiu-jitsu will not be expressed well, and it's just common sense to me, like if I have postural imbalances, or if I have injuries, or if I have weaknesses, then my jiu-jitsu is going to have imbalances and weaknesses and limits, and it's going to be stunted. So what I'm always trying to do is, I'm a person who's very much in my body. I'm always constantly running like checks. Like when I get up in the morning, I'm running this little diagnostic, like what's tight, what's moving well, where's stiff, I'm very in my body. And so I was finding that with a lot of heavy jiu-jitsu practice and the kind of training I was doing, which was generally a lot of weightlifting, a lot of pull-ups, a lot of that intense resistance style training, I wasn't feeling mobile. I wasn't feeling limber. I wasn't feeling good, and I was picking up strange little injuries. Like, I remember the one morning I woke up and I bent over the sink to brush my teeth, and something clicked in my neck, and I pulled something in my neck. And I subsequently realized it was due to the quality of the tissues in my upper back and my rhomboids. From years of grappling, those tissues had become so imbalanced and so, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it wasn't right. My body wasn't healthy, and it was sending me a message. And so that was another reason I started, and yoga, when I was doing yoga, it was the opposite. I would feel, okay, cool, this feels good. This feels like my body was soaking it up. It was saying, it was like, thank you. This is really, really good. This is, like I was just feeling, I was moving through the world differently, like standing up taller. My shoulders were pulled back more. I had better posture. And my jiu-jitsu was improving. I could do certain things that I couldn't do before, like certain Sean Williams guard and rubber guard and staying low in the mount. There were certain things that I'd just never been able to do, and then my study and practice of yoga had greatly improved my ability to do those things. And so that's kind of where Yoga for Grapplers emerged. Is it's that distillation of all the things I've learned to improve the vehicle, and I wanted to transmit that to my students and to my readers and my potential customers. I don't know if that makes sense. It's quite a long-winded.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Last question, and we probably got about 1 to 2 minutes for this one. How important is the breathwork aspect to your practice?
One of the very first people who started teaching me yoga said, the only tool you need in your study of yoga is your breath.
Wow.
And that stuck with me. She was like, that is the only tool you need. And to answer your question, it's vital. It's absolutely vital. The connection with the breath is what allows you to move into deeper stretches. Again, you know how we spoke about jiu-jitsu's combat yoga and yoga is solo jiu-jitsu? It's the same thing. I see that crossover in jiu-jitsu all the time. It happens every single time I'm training. I will catch myself, hey, Nick, you're holding your breath, or you're not breathing into a movement, or your breathing is irregular and you're panicking. And then that breath is that it's the bedrock. It's the bedrock of my jiu-jitsu and it's the bedrock of my yoga. And dude, like my another coach of mine, such a smart guy, he said, remember, like breathing is the first thing you do when you're born and it's the last thing you do when you die.
That's right.
You know, and if anything, dude, when I'm sitting writing a letter to someone, I'll catch myself holding my breath sometimes, and I'll see even the little letters that I'm forming with my pen are not flowing smoothly. Or when I'm having a conversation with someone and I start getting in my own head and like the kind of confrontational thing starts to arise, often that occurs when the breath is not, or when I'm holding my breath, or the breath is not flowing freely. And I'll remind myself to take a big exhalation and start breathing deeply and evenly again. Does it make sense what I'm saying to you?
Absolutely. Breath is life, man. Breath is, it all starts with the breath. And as you said, it also starts and ends with the breath. I really appreciate that insight. Unfortunately, I see a lot of variation within yoga from people that are really deeply into the breath work, and that's the central part. Everything radiates from there, and to others who it's mainly just kind of a real physical endeavor, and they may do a little breathing, but it's not much of it. But again,
I think another thing to understand is like yoga can become something as broad and as philosophical as you want. I mean, if you go to India and you speak to someone of yoga, it's very likely that they don't even consider the physical, the hatha component, the making all the shapes, a big part of it. Like yoga is an eightfold path whereby it's a bunch of spiritual disciplines, it's a bunch of moral disciplines. It's way bigger than just like rolling out your mat and throwing a bunch of shapes, you know.
Right.
Whereas for me, like I'm looking at it as a very physical thing. The same way, it's not really spiritual practice for me. It's more just like a tool for looking after maintaining my body.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it helps you with your being present and centered and mindful, though. And that's the beauty of it, is it can be different for everyone. Like you said, it is your practice, so that's awesome. Mm-hmm. All right, my friend, I really appreciate you being part of the conversation, the discussion, and sharing your insights, as always. Thank you very much.
My great pleasure, Marty. You ask all the right questions. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. Be well, my friend. Okay, I'm speaking with Dustin Brown, BJJ black belt and founder of Warrior One Yoga in Melbourne, Australia. So welcome, my friend.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
All right. So let's just start off by let us know where your black belt is from, or who it's under, rather, and where you are currently trained, Dustin.
My black belt is from Carlos Vieira. His nickname is Portuguese. He's from the Cia Paulista team out of Sao Paulo, and I've been training him for many years. And we're currently in Melbourne, Australia, and I train under Carlos pretty much full time.
And you're not only a BJJ black belt, but you are a former professional surfer, which is very cool. So I believe that took you all around the world, and that's how you ended up in Melbourne, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I was lucky to have some cool sponsors, and I was never on the competition circuit. I just had really good sponsors that allowed me to travel and do cool things, and I ended up meeting my wife in Melbourne, and I never left. It's a really cool city, and I feel very grateful to live here. It's an epic place.
Wonderful. So how did you get exposed to yoga? What initially drew you to it, and what has that been like for you?
Well, originally I was kind of anti. I had, growing up in Hawaii, the only people that I ever saw doing yoga were really dirty hippies, and I had this impression that yoga was just kind of some weird movement, mostly for women or people that were kind of super spiritual or hippie or odd. And that was just kind of my impression of it. So I kind of avoided it. And then my wife started going, and she did like a yoga challenge, and she went for a couple of months. I forget. I think about 6 weeks of pleading. She asked me every single day to go with her, and finally I broke and I went. And after the first session, I knew that it was going to be really good for me. Like from jiu-jitsu, my hands and my grips and everything were I was training really hard. So I would wake up in the morning. It's like I had claw hands, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure you know the feeling. Hard day, grip work, and you wake up and you got like mitten hands. So after first yoga sesh, I did hot yoga and a lot of down dog, opened up my forearms, and I was like, wow, that feels incredible. I want to try some more of this. And I decided to do my own challenge, and I did 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, I felt epic. And I was doing like strength and conditioning for my jiu-jitsu competitions and things like that. And I literally stopped doing all that and just started doing yoga every single day.
Wow. So you talk about an immediate impact that you saw and felt, and it led you to make changes right away.
Yeah, it was like, I felt like with the training I was doing, I was just managing injury and trying to prevent future injury. And I was always sore, and I always felt like something was going to break or about to break, or I was always maintaining something. And then I started doing yoga every day, and that disappeared. I wasn't in pain when I woke up in the morning, or if I was, I could practice yoga and quickly fix myself and get out of pain. And that was the biggest catalyst to have that experience of going from being achy every morning and being in a lot of pain from pushing my body and training hard to having something that I could instantly feel better by doing.
That's very powerful.
And then I could see that it helped me recover. It made me feel pain-free. And then, you know, I could see the results in training. I wasn't as sore. I was more flexible. I wasn't losing any strength, which was one of my biggest worries. I was like, oh, you know, I'm going to lose strength if I stop doing the weights and I start doing just yoga. And what blew my mind was like, yoga is way harder than weights and that kind of conditioning. Don't get me wrong, like deadlifts and Olympic weights, they have their place and they are amazing. But I think to a certain point, if you start to overdo it and you overload your system, then it's not what the body really needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not alone. I've heard a lot of people voice similar thoughts or concerns that, you know, if I give up heavy duty strength training for something like yoga or just kind of functional movement, you know, am I gonna digress? Am I gonna lose my strength? And once you delve into it and understand it on a deeper level, though, I think it doesn't take long before you see how powerful it is, for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think as well, just go and experience a strong yoga class. I think what people struggle with is there are so many yoga styles out there, mm-hmm. and ultimately it comes down to the teacher you go and practice with. If you go and practice with a teacher and you don't like what they like and you don't connect with them, and you know you're a jiu-jitsu guy and you go to a class and it's a super thin ballet girl who's teaching the class and she's talking about opening the heart nonstop and she's having you do plies and ballerina movements, you're not probably going to connect to that practice. Even though there's going to be some benefit there for you, mm-hmm. It's probably still going to be challenging. You're just going to be like, yeah, that was a little bit, not for me. But if you go to someone that you connect to and you're like, oh, that person, they seem switched on, they know the body, I feel amazing after, something special about that. Once you start to find teachers like that, then it starts to shift and change everything.
So you really don't want to shortchange yourself by trying one class and if it isn't, you know, doesn't knock your socks off, so to speak, just cashing it in and calling it quits. You really want to kind of check different classes out, different instructors, and see if you find one that really connects and resonates with you.
Yeah. 100%. I've heard so many, a lot of from jiu-jitsu guys especially, like, oh, I tried that once. I went with my girlfriend. It was so fluffy. We just sat on cushions and meditated, and you know, and that is a form of yoga, and it's very valid. But you got to consider, why are you going, and what's your intention? Why do you want to go? And when you find something that fits your intention, it's just a vehicle to become a better human.
Yeah, I agree.
Allows you to live. You know, that's what I've found.
And there's so many aspects. There are some people who only look at it as a physical endeavor, you know, the different asanas and just to have flexibility and things like that, all the way to people that are extremely spiritually minded and, almost 100% into the breathwork aspects and things like that. So, and everything in between. So what is your primary style, or what do you mainly do in your practice?
So I have a strong asana practice, which I do daily. And then I also have a meditation practice, which I practice twice daily.
Nice.
And so in the morning, I'll get up and I'll meditate. And then in the afternoon or evening, if I miss it in the afternoon, I'll have an evening meditation. And just those practices, just the meditation, like if I can't do something physical, I have found that if I do the mental aspect, I meditate, it has a physical effect. It has an effect on the physical body regardless. And that's something that I think that needs to be talked about more, is that meditation and visualization and pranayama are so effective at recovering the body and clearing the mind, especially if you're someone that suffers from, say, anxiety before competition and things like that. Oh my God, you instantly have tools that can allow you to overcome these things that can be such a debilitating thing for some people. And I think that's, and it all comes from within. You don't need any special, maybe a little bit of training, but no special equipment, no special environment. You can do it anywhere. You can do it with yourself. All you need is someone to teach you, or a book that you learn from, and then you're there. So I don't know. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, very amazing. You having a surf background, do you feel like that played a role in you adopting yoga, or making it easier, or anything like that? Or how did that come to play?
No, I wouldn't say. Connecting. I was talking to my friend yesterday, and the correlation between, say, surfing, jiu-jitsu, yoga, it's the flow state. I think I'm an addict to the flow state. I'm fully addicted to that sensation, that being in the moment, that complete presence that is demanded from you when you do those activities. And I think that's what really draws me to them.
Wonderful. So why does yoga go so well with BJJ, in your opinion, and why should BJJ practitioners adopt a practice or study it?
I think that in your life, we're all striving for some form of balance. And maybe you don't even know it yet, but that's what you are intrinsically looking for, something that balances you so that you feel complete. It's just like if you have a muscular imbalance, if you only train one side of your body and the other side is weak, you're going to be in pain, even though that one side of the body is super strong. So I think when it comes to your practice and what you're doing in your life, if you're doing something like jiu-jitsu, if you look, say, an example of yin and yang, the yin yang symbol.
Right.
If jiu-jitsu is yang, and that's the fire aspect, and that's strength, and that's masculine, and that's strong, and that's where you put your aggression and all your focus and your energy, which is a really positive place to place those energies, right? How can you then balance that by finding something yin, a yin energy that then counteracts the yang? Because just like all things, too much of one thing is a bad thing. So you have to have that balance. I believe that yoga, for me and in my life, yoga is my yin. So jiu-jitsu is my yang. That's where I do all my aggression. That's where I put a lot of that energy into. And then yoga balances that out and brings me into a place where I feel complete and whole.
That's great. I love the way you put that. It is all about balance, and whether you frame that in terms of the human nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic balance, because a lot of people look at it like that, out of balance, or the way you just described it. Either way, it's all about balance, and love the way you put that.
Yeah, thank you. And that's 100% it. Whether you want to describe it as yin and yang and like energy and this and that, or just parasympathetic and sympathetic, that's just it. You got to balance them out. If you're always in sympathetic, you're going to be a stressed out, aggressive person, and you have to be able to downregulate, especially if you want to recover and, be at your optimum.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the pranayama. How important is the breathwork aspect yoga to your personal practice?
Well, I think in my mind, I don't really separate them. I think it's essential and it's part of it, and without it, it's not the same. every yoga practice should incorporate the breath. Whether you're moving, whether you're doing a little bit of meditation, it should incorporate the breath. And if you're not incorporating the breath and there's not that connection, you're just kind of you're stretching, you're just doing exercise. And that's what brings it together. That's what completes it and makes a cycle. Without the breath, you're just kind of static. And I think the more you can connect to the breath and start to realize the role it plays in movement, and especially in release and down regulation, I think that can really help you in your jiu-jitsu. When things start to get aggravated and heated, if you find that you're a mouth breather and you're sucking air through your mouth nonstop, you know exactly those type of people when you roll with them, because you know they're going to gas out pretty quickly. But if you watch black belts, you watch people with skill, they don't seem to breathe out of their mouth. Their mouths are closed. They show emotion, but they're breathing through their nose. And whether they realize it or not, they've consciously or subconsciously switched into a breath pattern that's working for them, that allows them to work at a high rate physically, yet stay calm, cool, and relaxed. And so yoga, that's the goal. That's the goal, is to put yourself in these self-imposed positions of stress and difficulty. Okay, put your hand down, put all of your body weight over that arm. Now don't move, stare at one point, don't let your focus shift, stay for 10 breaths, don't fall over. And everything, gravity's against you, your mind is against you, everything's trying to make you fall over, but you're focused to the breath, the ability to get through each moment. So a seemingly impossible task suddenly becomes easy because you break it into tiny little bites, and those tiny little bites are each and every breath. And the same thing comes to play in a match. In each moment, instead of starting to get worried about what's happening, you can just slow it down to breath by breath. Suddenly opportunities start to present themselves. Your mind can think, and you'll just find, holes in your opponent's game and be able to capitalize them because your brain is oxygenated and you're in the zone.
Excellent, man. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your insights and knowledge and philosophy on this subject. I'm really glad you're part of the discussion. Any words before we bring it to a close?
Oh, thank you for having me on. And yeah, I hope that I can inspire a few more jiu-jitsu practitioners to hop on the yoga mat, because it really does allow you to be a more complete person. But even if you just hop on the yoga mat so that you can be a better jiu-jitsu fighter and not be in pain in your body, do it because you don't want Mr. Burns' claw hands.
So for whatever reason, just do it, right?
Whatever your reason, you hop on the mat for the first time, do it to make your girlfriend happy. Do it to make your wife smile. Yeah. Absolutely. And if that's enough reason to get you on the mat, do it a couple times. Find a good teacher, and if it doesn't change you, then come and find me, and we can have a role about it.
All right. Nice. Well, I know you said it's your mission to get as many people as possible, jiu-jitsu practitioners, into yoga. So I do think you're definitely making an impact in doing that. So respect to you, man, and keep doing what you do, brother.
Thank you so much, Marty. Thanks for having me on. Hope I didn't babble on too much, and I hope you have a great day.
All right.
Or night, whatever time it is where you are.
Right now it's 5:30 in the afternoon. So.
Beautiful. Have a beautiful night.
All right.
I'm gonna go and do some yoga.
Right on. Much respect, brother. Thank you, sir.
All right. Aloha. Bye.
All right. Aloha. Okay, Joey Diehl now joins the conversation, and Joey's a yoga instructor as well as a BJJ black belt and MMA fighter. So welcome, Joey.
Hey, thanks for having me.
My pleasure, sir. So Joey, start us off by just telling us who your black belt's under and where you currently train jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I got my black belt just over a year ago by Jeff Kern and Pedro Sauer.
Awesome.
I've been training jiu-jitsu for about 12 years now, and that's been my true love. Jiu-jitsu's been a big part of my life since I can remember, since I was 14.
Absolutely.
And it really led me in everything that I've done when it comes to fighting, and now yoga, which is my new love.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations on the black belt. Well done, sir.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so how did your yoga journey begin? What initially drew you to it, Joey?
Well, I'd say, especially being out in the Midwest, where I'm out in Illinois, yoga is definitely not too popular. It's not big mainstream, not like it might be in California or in the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not something that was really on my radar. I never really thought of yoga at all, to be honest. So for me, the first, I would say the first time I really even got exposed to it was actually from Jiu-Jitsu, being a big fan of Rickson Gracie and, watching his documentary Flow and seeing Choke was one of my favorite little documentaries. So seeing him flow on the beach and move, and, that was my first little exposure of, something that was like yoga, and the breath work and everything. And I saw that when I was young, and I remember feeling like there's something to it that I need to learn, right? And it wasn't until I was probably about 21 that I actually actively tried to practice and find, search for some knowledge on it.
Okay. So was there anything, after you got introduced to it, was there anything that you found challenging about getting into it, or did it come easily? What was that like?
I have to believe that, my background, or anyone's background in grappling, in jiu-jitsu, or even wrestling, really gives you a sense of body awareness that's hard to really learn in anything else besides like a grappling art or martial art, something that you really use your body one-on-one, right, that kind of stuff. So I have an advantage in that. Anyone who does grappling really has an advantage in just body awareness.
Yes.
Compared to someone who never grappled or anything, and they try yoga, it's very hard to be in touch with how your body moves. So we have that advantage in that sense, and yoga just helps to enhance that even more. Yeah. Really gives you a good sense of what your body is doing, where it is in space.
That's a great point. Those of us who've had some grappling definitely have a little bit of an advantage when it comes to that kinesthetic awareness.
Yeah.
Very
exactly.
Cool. All right. What kind or style do you practice for the most part? Or do you practice one particular style or several styles or what?
I try to learn as much as I can from all different styles. I started with like Ashtanga yoga, and then I just kind of opened up from there. And my teaching style is kind of based off of just the flow of jiu-jitsu, which is kind of how I like to teach yoga. It's just off of movement and understanding breath with movement. So a vinyasa style class is really what I feel for me as a jiu-jitsu artist or someone who's actively competing and active. It's the perfect style of yoga to really complement your jiu-jitsu, because it really teaches you how to move with the breath, how to control your breath when you move from one place to another. And so I feel the benefit is there with vinyasa style flow. Okay.
And if you had someone who was thinking about, someone who does jiu-jitsu and was thinking about checking out yoga, what advice or thoughts would you have to share with them?
I would say probably number one is just being open-minded. Right? That's usually the first obstacle. I know, and I can speak from my experience too. I've had some times when I've went to like a yoga class and honestly disenjoyed it. I did not enjoy it at all. So like there's these moments where you're like, this is not for me. And being open-minded to different places and really trying to do your own study, right? So sometimes you have to kind of search for things. So it's truth in grappling as well. Sometimes we just have a bad experience. We go somewhere and, maybe it wasn't the right place for us. Right? There's definitely just having that little bit of open-mindedness and to kind of search.
Okay. So keeping an open mind is important, and not giving up if you try it one time and it isn't, perfectly aligned or matched for you. So, because there are other classes and other teachers, etc. Just like in jiu-jitsu, find something that feels comfortable, feels right to you. Good advice.
Absolutely.
Also, I think people's preconceived ideas could come into that. If they have expectations or what they think it's supposed to be, or either they're very competitive and they start judging themselves, like I'm not doing this right or whatever. Same with meditation, you can start judging yourself. I don't think I'm doing this perfectly, and instead of just kind of letting it be and flowing.
I think my first few years of yoga were a lot of that. Just really I just couldn't get the competitiveness out of me. I come from a grappling competitive background, and you're in a class and you see all these people who are just like made of rubber, and you're like, I can't even touch my toes. So you can feel that kind of, you have to kind of let judgment kind of fall apart and really just be a little bit more self-aware of, where you're at. Because everyone has their own journey. It's just like jiu-jitsu. You come onto the mat, if you're brand new to jiu-jitsu and you think you're going to be able to roll like a black belt does, you're going to be, upset every time. Right? You have to keep kind of everything in perspective and just work on your own journey.
That's good.
And yoga's the same way.
So be willing to kind of be the beginner again, be the student.
Yeah, always. Yeah, absolutely.
Once we stop doing that, things aren't good, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So you mentioned the breath work. How important is the breath work aspect, the pranayama, to your particular practice?
I think it's massive for a lot of reasons. When we grapple and we're training hard, it's one of the first things that I notice whenever I roll with someone is how are they breathing? Whether they have any kind of sense of control of how their breath is working for them or against them. And it's something that, the more I did yoga, the more I realized that, the importance of it. And, just being able to control your breath, especially under stress, when you're in an uncomfortable position, when someone's on top of you trying to choke you, which is definitely an uncomfortable position, to be able to control that, panic is super important. And there's only a few ways to really do it. One is to grapple a lot and get beat up a lot and maybe learn how to do it, maybe don't. Or you can actually put yourself in controlled environments like yoga and try to work on that relaxing, calming breath.
Absolutely. That's big, because it can be really anxiety producing, to be in those kind of situations and not know how to breathe well. So yeah, yoga is a great way to start cultivating that breath awareness, but also that breath control. That's so important.
Absolutely.
So breath work is certainly one huge area that it can translate over to the benefits of jiu-jitsu. One of the benefits that yoga brings to jiu-jitsu. Anything else you think of that are really good reasons why BJJ practitioners should think about adopting yoga?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the number one reason is honestly just being a grappler, especially someone, if you've been grappling for, like myself, I started wrestling at 5 years old. So I've been doing grappling my whole life. And I remember I was 19 years old. I've already been fighting MMA professionally, and my body was honestly just beat up. I was just in pain. I remember waking up just being in a little bit of pain every day until I started moving, and I'd be good. And then I'd go to bed and I'd feel terrible again, right? So it's just that little bit of balancing yourself out. If you are always doing the same stuff over and over, right, which grappling is very repetitive, especially when it comes to lefts and rights. I know this is kind of like a weird idea, but if we do everything the same way, if we sweep to the left every time, we lean onto our left hip every time, when we do all these kind of repetitive motions, right, we become really imbalanced. And I feel like yoga, at least for me, has been that kind of just aligning myself back to normal. So a lot of it's just the lengthening and just rebalancing my body. And I feel like that's the number one value I feel like for myself. And I just notice it, and that's the best way to do it is to try and see how you feel. And for me, that's when my back pain went away, in general, my body has felt better, which the goal is always to, if we talk about jiu-jitsu, what the goal is to stay on the mat, regardless of how good you are or the goal is to stay on the mat. So if, yoga or whatever it is, stretching, you can call it whatever you want, right? If that's what can keep your body on the mat for longer, then, there's no better benefit.
Oh, that's a great point, because that is the goal. Sometimes people lose sight of it, but the goal is to stay on the mat for as long as possible. That's right, and enjoy it and keep enjoying it forever. And also
Chris Howder said something like that. I remember that stuck with me so well. He said something like it's not about the taps and who's winning, who's losing, but at the end of the day, it's whoever stays on the mat the longest.
That's for sure.
And the only way to do that is to stay healthy.
That's it. And good point about the muscle imbalances. There's a lot of ways to create imbalance, but favoring particular sides and things like that certainly cause imbalances. So yoga is also a great way to level all that out and kind of reset.
And for how healthy, I would say jiu-jitsu as an exercise, it's an amazing thing. Like if you're an inactive person, I would never say don't start jiu-jitsu because it's an amazing exercise for someone to do. But those of us who've been doing it for so long, it almost becomes a hindrance. It becomes this kind of like our body warps to this kind of, this design that we've done. So it's good to kind of open yourself up and cross-train in some way. And to me, yoga has been the perfect supplemental training.
Wonderful.
For grappling.
Wonderful. All right. Before we close, you guys, you and Professor Curran have an event coming up in the near future, correct?
Yeah,
you want to give a
in
little
February,
plug for that?
We'll be out. Absolutely. We've done two before, just these BJJ retreats. And the first time we were out in Wisconsin, and it was just a big grappling event. And I usually like to do yoga before I do any kind of grappling. And a couple people saw me warming up doing some yoga, and they jumped in. And they're like, oh, let me try this. And we noticed a lot of people had interest. So the next time we did it, we actually planned on having structured yoga classes. So it kind of grew from there. And this next one we're coming up in February in Cocoa Beach, Florida. We have yoga as a kind of a scheduled plan. So before classes, after classes, just a yoga session to kind of keep everyone feeling good after hard training.
Nice.
But yeah, if there's any interest in it, bjjretreats.com. You can find all the information there.
And I'll put a link in the show notes as well. So also a shout out to Professor Curran. What an awesome guy he is. And he was on the show as well. It was
I remember
episode 34.
I listened to that. Yep.
Yeah. All right. All right, Joey. I really appreciate you a big part of the conversation and adding your insights and thoughts. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. Be well, my friend. Okay, last but not least is Sebastian Brosche, who's a BJJ black belt and founder of Yoga for BJJ. So welcome, Sebastian.
Thank you very much.
And Sebastian, if you would just start us off by telling us who's your black belt under and where you currently train Jiu Jitsu.
My teacher is Eduardo Teta Rios from Frontline Academy in Oslo, Norway.
Wonderful. Is that where you currently train?
Yeah. I've been training there for 8 years.
Wonderful. All right. So how did you get introduced or involved in yoga?
It all started with a girl, and that girl later became my wife. But I was always kind of interested in yoga. I just never had the opportunity to do it. But when I met her, and she was a professional full-time yoga instructor, so she got me into it, and I really needed it at the time because my lower back was more or less completely messed up. So I took a half a year leave from BJJ and just did yoga, and that was enough to completely rejuvenate and restore my lower back so that I could fight full time again.
Wonderful. So you really experienced firsthand the power of a yoga.
Yeah, definitely, or the healing aspects of it, because my game got a lot better, but the thing I liked the most was to get pain free, because when you live in constant pain, or even worse, fear of pain, you're always kind of avoiding moves or positions where you think you will have pain. It's very limiting. So that was for sure the biggest upgrade I've ever done.
Yeah, whenever you're in pain, it's hard to focus on anything else, isn't it?
Exactly.
All right. So, Sebastian, is there a certain style or form that you practice, or do you do a variety or blend of styles?
It's definitely a set style. I practice something called Vinyasa yoga, which is a very modern approach to yoga. So it's not all the chanting and the Sanskrit and those things that are typical for a common class is more or less stripped away. So the spiritual aspects are more or less inherent. We don't talk so much about the deeper stuff, but we let those come naturally, and we focus more on the easy stuff, which is the physical stuff. So how to place your knees and hands and head correctly, and how to breathe in the poses, and that's more than enough for 99.9% of people the first 5 years. So we try to focus on the basics. The physical, the alignments of the actual position together with the breath, and that is difficult for anyone in any position to breathe and try to be even in the pose. It's super hard.
Are any tips that you have when it comes to breath or breath work related to yoga?
I think the biggest challenge people have in the beginning is to carve out time, because people assume that you need to kind of set off a big chunk of time every day, like you're watching your favorite episode online. It's like 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes. But I think it's better to just start with 10 minutes a day, because that's more than enough to make you feel better and to work with your problem areas. So if you do 10 minutes a day, then after a few months, you can do 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon, and that's 20 minutes a day. That adds up to hundreds of hours a year. Okay. So I would definitely start with consistency before a huge amount of time.
Okay, so start out slow, easy, and just be consistent. That's the biggest factor.
Yes, because I don't see yoga as yet another thing that you should be doing, that you have to take away time from your day. It's the opposite. Yoga is like drinking water, eating, sleeping, brushing your teeth. It's these things that you do to improve your life quality and well-being. And the more yoga you do, the more jiu-jitsu you can do, because it's every time you do a hard training, you move a little bit closer to a potential injury and overtraining, right? But yoga kind of pulls you away on that sliding scale. So the more yoga you do, the more jiu-jitsu you can allow yourself to do, because that's the problem most people have, is they want to train a lot, but their body doesn't allow it. But yoga is kind of the secret key that unlocks your potential to do more BJ.
Wonderful. I love how you put that. We tend to get caught up in thinking of it something extra to add to our already busy lives, instead of making this just integral part of our day-to-day existence and routines, because we're going to get so much benefit out of it.
Yeah, like the thing I hear most people do in addition to jiu-jitsu is lifting weights, right? And that's definitely not something you want to be doing too much of or do incorrectly. So if you have time and energy to lift weights, that's great, but do it under supervision and don't do it too often. And if you lift heavy weights, you're not gonna perform your best on the jiu-jitsu mat. So it actually takes time away from jiu-jitsu if you do a lot of power training. Whereas yoga is the opposite. Yoga is not like lifting weights. It's two completely different forms of activities.
So tell us about Yoga for BJJ. How did that get started, and what's that all about, Sebastian?
I really wanted to find a yoga style that was specific for BJJ, and I couldn't find one. And I talked to my wife, and she's like, yeah, but if you want something and you can't find it, then you're the one that's obliged to do it. So you just have to get started. And I really didn't want to start because I was so fresh to yoga. But when I saw, just after a year of yoga practice, I could see that my understanding of yoga was like 10,000 times more than the average jiu-jitsu person. So I felt confident enough to start, even though I was very fresh. I was like a fresh blue belt in yoga. But I just started the website, and I had 10 videos there, and people immediately responded positively. And I just put one foot in front of the other. And today I am I have countless of people from around the world who practices daily, which is absolutely great. I get messages every week from people in their 40s and 50s and 30s and 20s who says that yoga saved their jiu-jitsu career because they can roll and spar 4 or 5 times a week now without pain, and that was something was completely impossible just a year ago for them.
Wow. That's got to be really gratifying hearing from people like that.
Every tournament I go to, people come up and thank me, like, thanks for the yoga website. It's really helped me so much with my knee, shoulder, lower back, whatever, wherever.
Wow, so you're really making a difference. Props to you, Sebastian, for not waiting until you feel like you had it all figured out and were an expert before sharing it with others, with the world, because so many times we get bogged down and thinking, I don't know enough yet. I'll wait till I am further along in the journey before I can be impactful for other people. But you went ahead and did it, and wow, with great results.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to my wife because she really pushed me to start way too early. But the thing is, when you do things like that, then the pressure is not so high. If you wait until you're acknowledged, like a recognized expert, then you probably put so much stress on yourself and high expectations. So I always say, when people ask me about being an entrepreneur, I say it's very important to do a half-assed job, because a half-assed job is 10 times more than doing no job at all. So instead of waiting, doing nothing until it's perfect, do something really shitty, because when you look at something shitty, you are ashamed and you want to improve it immediately and you want to replace it with something better. But when you just have an idea in your head, like, yeah, how many business ideas have you heard? And people love to talk about them, but they never actually start doing it because they have this fantasy that it's going to be perfect. But a perfect idea can never be improved upon because it doesn't exist yet.
So true. That's a powerful message, and we all need to certainly embrace that for sure. All right. So what would you say is the most important thing about yoga, about your practice, and anything that you'd like to tell anybody who's maybe thinking about trying it out, but maybe are a little apprehensive?
The most important thing about yoga is that it works. It's very pragmatic. That you will see that some things just just after a few sessions, you will see things work out immediately, and you feel more flexible like immediately. And other things are gonna take years and years. Like just being present and focused and breathing and having kind of balance will take a long time. So it's just like jiu-jitsu. It's not like jiu-jitsu is super easy in the beginning in some aspects, and some aspects you will never ever be a master in it, no matter how much you desire it, because it's so damn hard. So I think yoga is really the key. It's the other side of the coin of jiu-jitsu that most people never touch. Like they go so well together, so that if you're really into BJJ, you're also really into yoga. You just don't know it yet, because that's really what yoga is like. Jiu-jitsu with yourself. Like you can't do sparring with yourself, but yoga is the equivalent of sparring with yourself, because you really get to know where your limbs are, how to move your body, how to stack yourself, how to be efficient with your own body. And you can apply that immediately when you roll with someone. Like your game will change forever when you really start practicing yoga regularly.
Wonderful. Well, it certainly is the perfect complement to jiu-jitsu. Where can people find out more about you and your work, Sebastian?
You can just Google yoga for BJJ, because I think I'm one of the very few people who do it, but my website is yogaforbjj.net, and we have like a 2-week free trial, so you can try out hundreds of videos and definitely find a couple of favorites. Because the thing is, it's just like BJJ, you don't have to learn all the techniques and all the combinations. You just pick and choose and find the ones that your body really needs and that suits you. And you just start practicing those, and that will give you both fast results and long-lasting results.
So really find out what works best for you and make it your own practice.
Yeah, start there. Start with the things you love and the thing that feels good, like that are instantly rewarding. And then eventually, when you make it a habit, like in the beginning, it's all you're super excited and pumped and motivated. But then eventually, you will. It has to be fun and joyful. Otherwise, you won't do it. If it just takes discipline to do it, you're gonna quit. So start where you feel good, and then down the road you can add on things that you dislike, and you will, if you do them for long enough, you will start liking those. Like I hated forearm plank, but now I really enjoy it. I can stand a minute in forearm plank and really enjoy the feeling of burning my muscles in my belly, because I know how good it feels afterwards.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you so much for being part of our conversation here, and I thank you so much for your time and your insights and your thoughts on this subject.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really hope to see. I really want to change the warm-up routine of all jiu-jitsu academies worldwide. I don't want people to just do jumping jacks and push-ups. I want people to do specific mobile flexibility work that is preventing injuries and making their jiu-jitsu better.
Well, I completely agree. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it, and be well.
Cheers. Thanks, man.
Okay, great discussion about yoga and jiu-jitsu. Really enjoyed that. A couple of the key points that I took away from that are, number one, yoga is very effective for recuperation, relaxation, and restoring balance. It can counter the damage that hard jiu-jitsu training can cause. Number two, there are many, many styles or forms of yoga, and one size doesn't fit all. If you try it and the first class or instructor doesn't do it for you, try another. 3, don't wait for the perfect time or conditions to start. Even if you're not flexible, don't have a lot of extra time, worry that you won't do it right, do it anyway. Just start and don't judge the process. And 4, yoga will help you on and off the mat. It will lower stress, make you feel calmer, more focused, and alive. And there were a lot more gems within those interviews for sure, but those are just some of the key takeaways that stand out in the moment right now in my mind. Okay, a little bit about my yoga journey. I've played with, dabbled, experimented with yoga quite a bit over the years, but never did it very well. And what I mean by that is I actually at times would kind of jack myself up by doing yoga. And perhaps I was being too competitive, perhaps I was pushing too hard. I just didn't really surrender to the process, so to speak. and I didn't really understand the breath at all. I knew that the breath was a big part of yoga, and let me back up. This is one reason I ask all the guys in the interviews, how important is breathing in their yoga practice, because obviously pretty much all yoga involves breathing. Inhale and exhale. You'll hear it various times throughout a class, but I think there's quite a range in just how much people are actually into that aspect of it. And also when you attend class, I've gone to a lot of different kind of classes over the years, and there's a wide variety in how that aspect is stressed, for sure. You always hear people say inhale and exhale, as I said, but very rarely is there talk about the actual mechanics of breathing, how to really make sure you're diaphragmatic breathing and that kind of thing. So it all changed for me if you follow the show, I've really gotten into breathing a lot more over the past year, and that's been a game changer for me. So once I learned a lot more about how to breathe better, I went back and started doing some yoga again, and it was a game changer. I would go into an asana, and then perhaps I was doing a twist, and I would twist just far enough to feel a little bit of resistance and not force it at all. And then as I used the breath, as I inhaled and exhaled deeply, I allowed the breath to expand me more into the stretch without trying to force it whatsoever. So now that was a huge difference for me. And I'm sure there's a lot of yoga practitioners, and especially advanced yoga practitioners, that are aware of this and have been doing this for years in their practice. But for me, it was a revelation, and it totally changed the way I related to the asanas and the practice of yoga. So love it. Again, if you're a follower of the show, the breathing has become super important for me, especially in this past year, and so much so that I'm doing a video program, Breathing for Jiu Jitsu. And my hope is that it will be a really great complement to people that already have a regular yoga practice, as well as other people. All right. Thanks again for my guest today. Wonderful discussion. Stay tuned now for a short Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Okay, time now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And today I want to talk about savoring the moment. So I was listening to a clip on Facebook the other day by Dave Kovar, and he was talking about gratitude and savoring the moment. And I've always been someone, I shouldn't say always, but for a long time now, I'm pretty good about gratitude. I think being grateful, and the more gratitude we have in our life, the happier we're going to be. Also, especially with the theme of the show today, is mindfulness is a big deal for me. Being in that present moment, not living in the future, not living in the past. And when he was talking, the word savor really stood out in my mind. So like I said, I'm pretty good about being in the moment, but I really love the word savor. And from now on, I'm going to adopt this word as kind of a mini mantra. I'm going to try to not only be present in the moment, I'm going to try to savor the moment. So no matter if I'm with my kids, if I'm in jiu-jitsu, if I'm looking at a sunset, whatever it may be, or doing yoga, I want to savor the moment. So as you're going through your day, your week, your month, remember this word. Have it flash in your mind. Savor. Savor the moment. Savor who you're with. Savor that time together. I think by doing this, we'll all be a lot more healthier and happier. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.GJJR.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments, as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.